Hello. My talk today will be on the topic of AI and the question of trust. But instead of asking whether or not we can trust AI tools or AI systems, I will instead be talking about trusting those who inform us about AI. As the world gets more complicated, we are forced to outsource our knowledge production, understanding, and decision making to external parties. You can see this reflected in many aspects of our everyday life. For example, when your car breaks down, who should you go to? Usually a mechanic. When you feel tooth pain or a toothache, who do you go to? A dentist. Relevant to this talk, when you're concerned about the impact of AI, who should you go to? And this raises an important question of who is an expert and who can be trusted. So this is the first question that we will tackle in this talk. Who are the experts that we can trust when it comes to AI? So first, some points. AI, like many other fields, is a specialized field of study that requires many years of education and practice in order to gain proficiency. Trusting incorrect parties can result in the propagation of harm, adoption of harmful or ineffective policies, unjust distributions of benefits and harms, among many other concerns. So the question is then, who should we trust when it comes to AI policy? And there is no single requirement for trust. While the question is important and sort of fundamental, people will disagree on who we should trust. One common understanding of trust is that it's composed of multiple parts. For example, an expert that you trust should be competent, have integrity, have independence, and have accountability. So let's talk about possible AI experts. So the first option is to sample random members of the public. While on average we can assume that they will not be conflicted and that their views will align with that of the public, they unfortunately do not possess the advanced specialized training in order to serve as experts. And this is a problem when we're looking for their input with respect to policies. Others would suggest industry experts, those that are building tools, be the experts that we rely on and trust. Often, industry partners themselves try to position themselves, their employees, or their representatives as experts that can be trusted to create policy. However, they do not, while they do possess the specialized training, their priorities do not necessarily or align with that of the public. Large and publicly traded companies are focused on company values, shareholder returns, and monetary concerns. And when this intersects with AI policy, as it often does, we cannot trust them to make the right decision that benefits society, even if it was at the cost of their own company. Note, this does not mean that those working for or employed by industry are not trustworthy, lying, or seeking to cause harm. Rather, only individuals who embody and personify and personally believe what is best for the company would be good for society would be placed in such a role. Thus, relying on industry experts will bias any policy feedback to whatever is best for these companies, whether or not they intend this to be the case. The last possible option, among many, but the last one that we'll be talking today about is academic experts or civic experts, i.e., those at civil organizations or nonprofits. While they do possess the advanced training, it's unclear whether or not their interests align with that of the general public. This leads us to our second question. Are the interests of academics aligned with that of the general public? And to start, to intuitively explain this issue, I'd like to lean on an analogy that's not perfect, but I think will get us to where we need to go. So imagine there's this hypothetical health policy conference with 10,000 plus attendees. It was largely funded by Big Tobacco, and among the many topics covered in this health policy conference, it talks about wildfire smoke, but also among the many topics covered is how to best deal with the negative effects of increased tobacco usage. Would this be accepted by the health policy community or by the general public when it comes to the findings of this conference? No, this would be generally viewed as unacceptable. Article 5.3 of the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control states that in setting and implementing public health policies with respect to tobacco control, parties should act to protect their policies from commercial and other vested interests of the tobacco industry in accordance with national law. So clearly, this is not acceptable. However, if we replace health policy with AI ethics or machine learning, big tobacco with big tech, then the effects of increased tobacco usage with the effects of increased AI deployment, would this be accepted? And this is not really a question. This is the current state of the art. It's no longer hypothetical, but the way things are right now. And this is whether or not you're talking about technical conferences like NeurIPS, the Neural Information Processing Systems Conference, or AI ethics conferences such as Fairness, Accountability, and Transparency Conference. All of these conferences have large amounts of funding coming from industry or vested parties, as the WHO statement said. This is not just the views of an academic who's not on this line. For those who may doubt this thesis or think that this analogy is unfair, this is the best proof or argument for this analogy being accurate comes from industry themselves. So when Google was in a lawsuit against Oracle, there was this nonprofit called Campaign for Accountability, and Oracle was funding this nonprofit. And Google, in their blog post, questions the anti-Google work done by the Campaign for Accountability because they are funded by Oracle, which has an incentive to hurt Google. So if we extract away the proper nouns, Google questions the work done by unaffiliated non-for-profit researchers because they are funded by a corporation which has a profit motive or sort of a competing interests. Essentially, this is the exact same thesis that we started out with. Industry warps research by pushing its values on those who accept the funding, or basically those that are conflicted. Why would industry fund academia? And largely speaking, if we leverage the history of big tobacco, there were four main reasons to fund academia, and you can see them listed here. The first of these is sort of PR. You want to reinvent yourself as socially responsible in the public image. You want to influence the decision or effect events made by funded universities or researchers. You want to influence the individual research plans of academics, or you want to discover receptive academics who can be leveraged. It's important again to note here that we are not making claims that they are intentionally trying to do this. Even if it's unintentional, these 4 points can be happen, and one argue could be stopped. To those that work in the field of AI, it's clear that a lot of research is funded by big tech. By acting as granting bodies, they will be able to modify the research of those who apply for funding. And this can happen without malintent from either side. For example, those working in Silicon Valley are more likely to believe in technical solutionism and other Silicon Valley centric views. And therefore, the applications that hold those views are more likely to be selected when a funding call goes out because they're not challenging the underlying assumptions of those who are providing the funding. And this will become obvious to applicants who then face pressure to mold their application such that it fits or at least does not challenge the views of those who are providing the money, and therefore without any direct malintent or agreement between academia and researchers, big tech can direct the research funding into a sort of a friendly direction. And sort of to put a quantitative lens to this, instead of just theoretical analysis, we surveyed the CVs of four schools to see how deep the financial connections between these four schools and big tech really was. So these are the four schools: two public, two private, two East Coast, two West Coast. And this is what we threw under the umbrella of big tech, all of the companies that you see here. And we can see that it's a substantial number. If you look at all computer science faculty, 52% of them have funding relationships with these companies. And if you limit it to AI faculty, it increases to 58%. And those working in AI ethics, that have previous research funding, it's 58%. And this is much greater than the percentage of researchers who were receiving funding from big tobacco at its peak, which was like 5 to 15% according to estimates. If we expand past financial relationship to be greater than just direct research funding, but let's say previous internships or I worked there at a previous time, the percentage skyrockets for those in AI ethics to 97%. Again, we're not saying that this is conscious or necessarily going to affect you, but it's a clear demonstration that a lot of academics in the field are exposed consistently to the logics of Silicon Valley, and therefore we're more likely to adopt their viewpoints. And there's a real world example to this. So this paper by Young et al. Studied a paper that was co-authored by industry and academics. It was published in Fact 2021. It audited this candidate hiring screening algorithm. The paper was funded and enabled by the companies, but the reviewers were double blind, so they did not know this. Once the paper had been published, the company claimed that this paper served as an independent audit of their tool, which was not true, and lobbied for its use in New York City's bill about automated hiring. So this takes us back to the question of who should we trust as experts? And unfortunately, we see that systematic change in academia is required in order to win the trust of the people. While we do have the expertise, we unfortunately do not have the independence required to be trustworthy experts, and that processes need to be adopted to increase transparency, independence, and accountability. And without these, it's going to be hard to make an argument for people to trust us. Thank you for coming to my talk. I hope you found it interesting. And if you have any questions or would like to reach out, my email is on the screen. Thank you.